So good evening to everyone. Welcome to this live stream public meeting by the Medway Trade Union Council in response to the latest constantly evolving government plan to ease lockdown, put children back into school and push workers back to the workplace, whether it's timely or not. For those who don't know me, my name's Ivor Riddell. I'm the press officer for the Medway Trade Union Council and your host for this evening's meeting. So hi. Just a couple of points to raise. Unfortunately, earlier today, Kevin Courtney had to withdraw from the event as some urgent union business has arisen which requires his full attention. So he does send his sincere apologies and best wishes for the evening's business. We have, however, managed to find an excellent replacement to speak on education in Camille London Mayo. Camille is a very experienced senior and middle secondary leader, an English teacher. She is also a past president of the City of Leicester NEU and Equal Opportunities Officer. Teaching in a statutory and non-statutory education sector for nearly 30 years, working at all levels from classroom teacher to deputy head teacher in secondary and primary phases. She is a proud active trade unionist and one of the founder members of the Leicester Black Teachers Network. Voted East Midlands National Education Union Officer of the Year for 2018-19. As a black woman with a disability, Camille says she became even more involved with the NEU response to the various COVID updates and its impact on black educators in the workplace. Camille is also a member of the National Education Union Black Organising Forum. We also welcome this evening the General Secretary of what is deemed one of the most militant trade unions in the UK at the moment. Mick Cash is the General Secretary of the National Union of Rail, Maritime and Transport Workers, who will talk on the railway and wider transport sector and the impact the latest changes will have on their members and families. Mick has been a long-serving senior officer with the RMT, starting his railway career as a young member on the Signals and Telephones Division. Mick has been a GS for 6 years, and in that time, the union has faced many struggles, de-staffing, attempts to deregulate and diminish safety standards. He appeared on Question Time last week and made a very forceful point about the government trying to undermine a well-worked package for bringing back rail operations, though many think his highlight was when he told the Tory MP he was talking a load of tosh. So, on with the evening's business. I will introduce each speaker and they will speak on their thoughts and position around the CV19 issue and the government's roadmap. We will then take 2 questions to the speaker, then move on. After this, I will introduce the panel for the Trade Union Council, who will take questions and points from the audience. To welcome our first speaker this evening, Camille London Mayo from the NEU.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me this evening. Since the premature messaging from the government that they were going to open schools from June the 1st, the consistent message of the National Education Union has been that we are prepared to widely reopen schools when it is safe to do so. Since the crisis began, teachers and other education staff have been working hard to stay open and to support our most vulnerable children and the children of key workers. And the 5 steps that we have said that we want in order to reopen schools more widely is that we should have much lower numbers of COVID-19 cases, a national plan for social distancing, there must be testing that's comprehensive and it's accessible, that all schools should have a strategy for dealing with COVID if a case arose, and there should be protection for the most vulnerable members of the school community. None of those steps have been met to date. Yes, we have seen numbers go down and we've seen numbers come up, but there's been no consistency there. The government has said that there should be national social distancing, but there's no need for social distancing in schools. They did amend that later, and so in the past couple of weeks, where schools have been trying to decide whether to go back or not, They've been trying to organise the schools in order to see what social distancing would look like. I've had many discussions with many colleagues where they talk about how ridiculous this idea of social distancing in schools, how ridiculous that idea is. The fact of the matter is, testing is not happening whole scale. And so even if schools did open widely, as the government wants, on June the 1st, there is nothing to say that 5 students or 5 members of staff would go into the school with COVID and we wouldn't know anything about it, because there's no mobile testing units available at the doors of every school, or some element of testing. Schools have struggled to put together strategies of how they would deal with a case of COVID when it arises. But again, this is variable based on the school context. And in terms of protection for the most vulnerable, again, that has been an issue for us as unionists, because management, employers, have made the decision that they are going to decide who is the most vulnerable, who will be allowed to stay at home. So in terms of Black members within the NEU, the government data, we're all very aware of this, that we're disproportionately affected by this virus. And these figures have been well advertised in the media. However, what hasn't been advertised in the media is the fact that we know that in Senegal and in Ghana, they have kept COVID down using early response and contact tracing. We know that the Section 44 of the Health and Safety Act does not give, we know that it doesn't give staff a freestanding right not to attend their place of work, but it does put a duty on employers to ensure the health and safety at work of their employees. Regulation 8 requires appropriate procedures to be put in place. And by appropriate procedures, we've interpreted that as the risk assessments. And what we've seen over the past 2 weeks is management teams rushing to put together risk assessments without including the unions. As a result of that, there have been lots of gaps in what they've tried to say are the procedures they would use as of the 1st of June. Also, there's been variation in how schools have decided to carry out their risk assessments. Some have dealt with it in terms of an at-risk area for an at-risk section for the most vulnerable or at-risk members of staff, while others have asked for individual risk assessments from each at-risk member of staff in their school. And the issue that we've found with that as unionists is that many of our members are worried that by having an individual risk assessment, they could, a bit further down the road, be first in the line for issues to do with capability and being forced out of their jobs. Part of the requirement of the Health and Safety Act requires employers to provide suitable personal protective equipment, PPE. And again, there's variation in terms of how schools have dealt with this. Some schools have said that they will provide basic PPE for all of their staff. Other schools have said, we can't afford it, so we're not, and the government doesn't feel that you need to use it, so they're not using any. Other schools that I know of have said that they'll provide some PPE, but not specific. So based on the fact that you know there are certain at-risk groups in your school community, they're not saying, because I know you're at risk, I'm going to ensure that you have access to a face mask, you have access to hand sanitizers. All staff are grouped all together. And as trade unionists, we have to work out whether that is a level playing field. Another part of the Act states that staff should have a safe working environment. However, government advice on this has been very variable. Statements, for instance, like we should all wear a face covering in public places, whereas in some schools, heads are banning face coverings. The government says we should, as I said earlier, should continue to practice safe distancing, and then another breath says it doesn't apply in schools. And the fear for many of our members, our Black members particularly, is that there are so many loopholes that at the end of the day, we are the ones that will be at the front line being sacrificed in the government's latest test. In schools where there are majority Black pupils, what does the risk assessment look like for schools? Again, this does not appear to have been a consideration in any of the statements given out by the government. And so at this point, a week away from the government's June 1st reopening of schools, nothing is secure. So what can we do? What can our unions do? Well, the NEU has stated that Black members should be treated in the same way as those who are clinically vulnerable. That's important because they're saying, because of the data, because of what it says, that we have to consider the risk to Black members of going into schools at this time where there is no testing and there's no PPE. It's important as unions for us to find out where our Black members are, check that they're aware of the Black union support groups in the area. In the NEU, we have our National Black Educators Group, and in each area, we have Black Educators Groups. We have to, as unions, we have to see that there are checklists for our at-risk groups and for all members, checklists that they can go through as to what a good risk assessment looks like. And when supporting schools and workplaces, we need to carefully check these risk assessments and the plans presented for the support for our at-risk groups. If possible, like the NEU, put together a model example that reps can use. Where individual risk assessments for at-risk groups are presented, it is vital that unions have clear systems to support our members who may subsequently be placed on capability procedures. And we also need to consider what initiatives we can do as a union, as a trade union body, to promote mental health and well-being within our Black communities, because it's critical. It's critical for all of us, and particularly for our Black communities. We're in a situation where when you talk about community, you really are talking about multi-generational households, you're talking about social communities, and the fact that we've been disproportionately affected by this virus. Many of our loved ones are dying. Funerals are a community event. Many of our members have suffered great trauma because of what has happened during this time. So we have to build in systems to support them. It's a new virus, and how much do we really know? The government did not consult when it decided to set the date of the 1st of June. And being active trade unionists, we must consult all of our membership on the way forward. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Camille. What we're going to do now is we're going to take a couple of questions, hopefully, that Chaz will have gleaned from the audience or elsewhere.
So I've got a question here. Many school leaders are standing by the 5 tests, but in some parts of the country, they're not doing that. And so in some places, teachers are going to feel quite isolated. What do you think is the best way to build support for those teachers in those particular communities?
One of the things that we've seen the value of in our fight against this pandemic has been the building of links within our communities, building our links between parent groups, stakeholders that all have a vested interest in a school community. And where we do have school leaders who have not followed the 5 tests, we have found that by lobbying and supporting parents groups associated with those schools, pressure is brought to bear on those school leaders to do the right thing.
The next question is a political question, really. And what support do you think that the NEU as an affiliated union should expect from the leadership of the Labour Party? Should the Labour Party be supporting the NEU's 5 tests?
Well, in my opinion, yes. And to many of the MPs that are around the country have supported the 5 tests, because the 5 NEU test steps are not radical. They are not, they're very considered, they're very measured, and we've not said anything that has not been totally consistent with what is happening, in the wider community. So we have had the support of many Labour MPs who have spoken in Parliament in support of the 5 steps. Most recently, Rebecca Long Bailey just the other day, and Liz Kendall just the other day. So yes.
Mick Cash, General Secretary of the RMT Trade Union, has now managed to join us, which was perfect timing, really, as we move on to the second speaker. Mick.
There you go. I have to say, I didn't know he had such power and control over me.
Only for an evening.
You can not only stop me talking, but you can stop people seeing me. It's unbelievable. Apologies for not being at the start. Just a little bit of a domestic. I had to go and pick my wife up from the shop. It took a lot longer for her to get things done today than we normally do. So I do apologise for not being at the start. And I picked up that you'd obviously talked about what's going on with the NEU, and can I just praise the NEU for the way they've dealt with the issue, which I think is vexing all of us at this moment in time. And from a trade union that's had to, a bit like the transport union, so that's buses, road freight, and rail, where we've got members who have had to continue working during this crisis. And in the main, I think our people have been, I've had 2 emotions. One, proud of it, certainly being able to help and support NHS and care workers in the difficult job they've done at the real sharp end of that. But then also, they've also got the same other emotion, which is the opposite. I've been quite frightful of what this horrible virus would mean for them, their families, and obviously the worry that they go to work and they may catch it and they may be okay, but it might pass it on to their loved ones. And that's without the whole issue of vulnerable workers, pre-existing conditions. And what's emerging, as I picked up in the latter part of Camille's contribution there, about certain parts of our community, the BAME community in particular, seem to have a disproportionate impact on them. And why that is, and we don't know. That's the problem. And there's work being done. We wrote to all our employers on the rail sector this week, and the DfT and the safety regulator about that particular point. Why is it happening? Is it happening? Why is it happening? Because there isn't a great deal of information that helps you deal with this crisis. And actually, the one thing I've learned from the whole of this is that actually information helps us manage and get a context to where we're going and what's going on. If I was to go back now until January and February, I had a big birthday in February. I was 60, and we had a party, and we had people from up and down the country turn up to it, and we knew something was going on with this thing called coronavirus, but we didn't know the real impact of it. And then suddenly it caught up with us in March. No one was really alerting us to it, although there were, as you now seen emerging, people saying lots of things around is the concerns about it. And there was a complacency, I think, in the population at large, driven by the complacency of the government. And that's meant that we had to do a lot of catching up as we got into this crisis because of that complacency. But of course, after 10 years of austerity, we're in a place where we haven't got some of the tools at our disposal that would have had the key infrastructure that you would expect, the NHS being properly resourced, the care homes properly resourced, civil service, being decimated, not being able to provide all the stuff that you could expect. And that's without working through what we do about PPE and the fact that they've had exercises. I've known that we're vulnerable as a society, but governments of this particular ilk have kept it from us. Again, being complacent about some of the warnings that have come in. So all of that's happened unbeknownst to us as we've been walking into this virus, crisis. And we've had to do a lot of catching up, actually. That's the first thing I'd say. I don't feel others feel that. So in the first few weeks of this, we were catching up, us as organisations and our members, in terms of what to do, what would be expected, what advice we could give. And it took about 3 or 4 weeks before we were in a place where we could be, I wouldn't say fully operational, but in an operational mode that can help us start to push back more fundamentally and challenge more fundamentally some of the narrative that was being pushed by the government, and also provide the level of support that you'd normally have in these circumstances. But that has happened, and we've spent, I don't know, is it 3 weeks? I've lost track, actually. I haven't seen London for two months, I think now, my office for 2 months. And we've had to get all those levers that we'd normally have and get it done, and then all the advice that you'd normally expect. And so we've done that. And in the meantime, learning about the impact this is having, trying to reassure. And of course, there's the whole issue of PPEs coming to it, whether it's been available. And the advice as the government have moved this has been very difficult for us to make judgments on. So I think we've been pretty proactive in the rail sector in particular. And a lot of this, I dare I say, it comes down to where well organised. Where you've got unions well organised, despite the fact we would have struggled and there might be some concern, we've managed to react and prevent and deal with things better than where we are not well organised. And I dare I say, both rail, buses, where there's strong trade unionism, and in education, where there's another sector, strong trade unionism, we've managed to be able to set a stall out to protect our members. But the other thing that we've also managed to do, Camille was saying that working with the communities, is that one of the things that we've also been talking about is not only protecting our members, but also protecting passengers, because whatever we do has the effect of doing both. And we're now in a place where we're coming out of lockdown, it's the easement, and we set early doors, and in the rail industry in particular, a national framework. We created a rail industry coronavirus forum, as they called it, where we had all the major players in the room seeking to work through a standards that we could put across the rail network, and to varying degrees we were successful. That then allowed us to have a program of discussions going forward, which have now helped us get into a place where we've got a process in place for, as the government eases lockdown, we're in that place. Sorry about that, it's a door just slammed. We've got a whole process where our reps and us as a union, us unions on the rail side, are actually involved in looking after, doing risk assessments, looking after our members, but also looking to see what we can do to protect passengers and trying to control what's going on. I had a meeting of that national body yesterday, and one of the things they're looking at is a dashboard to look at some of the key indicators, about levels of sickness and amount of people using the services, and amount of trains being operated, because that then feeds into what the big issue around going forward is about social distancing. And so as we come out of lockdown, social distance to some degree was you stay at home, but the 2 metre social distancing rule is going to be really important if we're going to protect our members, because PPE is the last resort in these circumstances. And to have social distancing, you need space, and if you need space, and in the education, it's the same as a school, is the same as a train in some respect. You've got a train or a platform. How many people you have on it will judge how and what they do when they're on it. Dare I say, with adults, you hopefully be more responsive, being able to control things than dare I say, our younger generation, who may be more excitable and such like. But if you have space, you can then do social distancing. If you don't have space, as we've seen in some places, the tube network in some rush hour in some places, it becomes more and more difficult, and then you need protection both for passengers and staff. So there's all these issues that we've had to try and deal with and work through, and been very difficult, but we've been managing to get the advice to our members. We've been managing to get process in place. We've kept our reps active and involved. as Ivor would no doubt tell you, kept communicating. I've never known so many communications we've done, but all of it electronic. I'm getting out and around the country, but I'm only in one place, so technology has helped us do that. I was in Hull was it this week or last week? I was doing a meeting in Hull on the P&O crisis. We're also seeing employers, P&O being an example of that, getting opportunistic around this. But as we move out of this, we've got to make sure we can do the most we can to protect our members and also the users of our service. And that's our key objectives in all of this. But also, we then have to start turning to what's likely to come. We're going to face cuts, I think, and attacks as a recession hits. And we've got to be in a good place to deal with those. And then talk about what our society is going to be like when we come through this. The other side, as I said to one of our members of staff as I left Unit House 2 months back, I'll see you the other side of this. It was a little bit of a message. I didn't envision it's going to be so long, but the fact that we may have social distance to the end of the year is going to obviously mean that we've got to be vigilant, and there's going to be a whole host of problems going forward that we've got to keep going. But come what may, we can't go back to austerity as a way of solving the problems that this crisis is dealt with. And I notice people that we've seen some of that. We cannot and must not go back there. I read a letter in the Guardian last week about, at the end, we had 75 years of VE Day last week. 75 years ago, 50% of the workforce is employed by the government. Now, we haven't got those levels of employment by the government. They're paying it and they've done the right thing in furlough and whatnot. But we, as a community, when I started working in 1978, I was still paying for the First World War because the last debt on that wasn't paid till 100 years ago, until 2019. And I'm still helping to pay for the cost of the Second World War. After that Second World War, we had austere times, but we had a Labour government that turned into one of the most progressive governments this country's ever seen, and set the stalls out for what I benefit from and what my kids still benefit today in terms of the NHS and my grandkids. So we've got to make sure as we come out of this, not only do we look at the most immediate arrangements, but we also look at what's the sort of society we want, fight attacks, make sure austerity doesn't rear its ugly head in all different forms, make sure that bosses don't get opportunistic as some are, and also have that wider debate within our society about how we are in this together and how actually as a society we're so interrelated. Because I'll tell you this, if we didn't need a reminder about how much we're interrelated, you would see it now. The fact that previously we would all understand the role that doctors and nurses played in our society, how firefighters are important, how the police are important, how ambulance workers are important. But now we're seeing that our society is also dependent on care workers, dependent on cleaners, quite often outsourced, underpaid, and overlooked parts of our society. And now we're starting to have to readjust our thinking about that. And that's one of the things what we've got to do. And that's both, that's in the workplace, that's political, but that's also in the streets, in our communities. We've got to start saying, let's build on that. Shop workers, your Sainsbury's, your local shop, they've helped us go. And people have turned up in a white van delivering stuff. A lot of them, by the way, in casual terms and conditions. They've been crucial to making sure that we continue to survive and operate as communities. And so we're going to have to end up paying for this. We should be. We're also going to have to make sure we want to change our society to make sure it's better than one we got coming into this crisis. And that's the other thing I hope we're going to be doing either. So there's been some ups and downsides to what was going, but it's been an experience. But I think we now need to figure out where we're going to go next, and we will get over this crisis. And the more immediate thing is about the easement and the problems associated with that. Then the next phase is going to be, well, what's the state of the economy and what they're going to do about that.
Thanks very much indeed for that, Nick. Very comprehensive. As with the previous speaker, Camille, I'm now going to hand over to Chaz for a couple of questions from the audience.
Well, actually, I've got 3 questions if we've got time.
Crack on.
Yeah. So the first one is, Mick, do you think the employers have acted appropriately, given the tragic death of Belly Manjinga, who's a staff member who died having been spattered on by a member of the public. So the next question was from David Jones, who says, do the RNT support the call to bring back conductors to ensure social distancing on public transport? And the final question is, you've alluded to it in your contribution about the P&O workers, opportunistic employers, but it's particularly relevant here in Kent. Is what is the RMT doing to support seafarers, particularly at P&O, where they've announced the sacking of 1,100 workers?
Do I think employers have acted appropriately? I mean, one of the things that we found early doors when we were talking with the rail industry, we actually had to put pressure to create what we call RISIF, which is the Rail Industry Coronavirus Forum. But the last two times when we've had big crises in the railway, that was in the First World War and the Second World War, we end up creating industry-wide bodies, and we've effectively done that, although it's been like herding cats sometimes. And one of the things we tried to do was to get clarity, and it took a while to do that. And I think there's opportunities been missed because of that, around key protections for workers. So I don't think in the case, for example, of our dear friend from Victoria, and she wasn't the only one. There was two spat on that day, and both got COVID-19. One survived, sadly, Belly didn't, and it's a tragedy that should not have happened. They did at the time ask for not to be doing that activity because of what was going on, and the company should have done more. It's quite clear, and I think we're going to find up and down the country as we emerge from all of this that there'll be examples of where things could have been and should have been done differently. There'll be reasons for that or excuses, but the fact that and it comes a bit to what I said about the complacency. This government engendered a sort of sense of complacency in coming into this crisis. And the confusion coming out of it, and that complacency, I think, led to that issue around the advice and the way the employers acted. In terms of the RMT support conductors to ensure social distancing, so we've agreed with the rail industry what we want to do about getting more passengers as they crank up the services. And the reality is going to be, certainly for a period, there's going to be less people travelling on the rail network, but we want more trains to maintain space. But one thing we have said, it's not down to the staff to police that, but it is certainly the importance of having these our stations and train staff to protect the staff, to protect and reassure, and make sure that passengers are reminded of their responsibility. But as in terms of actually going in and trying to reinforce or police that, I wouldn't think we'd support that, because that's putting workers in harm's way. But that's why we're asking for, when we have to get into a situation where on trains that workers have appropriate PPE, which will include masks, and now more increasingly visors. Visors would have protected Belly and her colleague at Victoria, for example. And by the way, that's not the only example, sadly, of people. We've had stories of bus workers have been spat at during this crisis. So having the right equipment, but in terms of how far you want to go for workers to police this, I don't. There's going to be an element of self-policing by the public, but having trains where you don't have cracked trains and thinning out the trains will actually help a lot to do that, as much as having them properly staffed. In terms of P&O, I mean, we've been trying to sit down and work through with P&O. As a company, by the way, got wads of money that paid dividends, over £250 million back to its owners, which is Dubai Ports. It's a sovereign fund from Dubai, and paid them dividends, then looking to have handouts from the UK government to protect workers, and then decide to issue 1,100 redundancies. And there's no guarantee that when those, because there's a drop down in trade, but there's no guarantee that if the trade picks up, and I suspect it will, because ferries are crucial to the life of this country, and we will get back to normality in terms of travelling to and from the continent of Europe. That those jobs won't come back, and that we might more likely see, as we sadly see elsewhere in the shipping industry, low cost model, so where they bring workers on rates of pay that relate to their home country, and that can be Ukraine, it could be Poland, it could be the Philippines, and they pay them the rate of pay for that rather than the UK, at least the UK minimum wages. So we are deeply worried about the impact of that. We've launched the P&O, Save the P&O Jobs, Save Britain's Ferries campaign, and we got a logo for that. And the reason I was at a meeting in Hull, I think it was early this week actually, was promoting the issue of saving ferry jobs and saving P&O jobs. But we've got to get back to, which is this other thing about, let's not go back to where we were around key industries and key sectors in our that are important in our society, in our country, need to be protected, and the ferry industry is one of them. So that's why that supporting that campaign is going to be really important.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Mick. Right, okay, so we're now going to move on to the panel. So if I just introduce the panel to you first of all. Obviously, we've met Camille. We've got Rizwana Shelley, who is a retired teacher and still very much an activist within the National Education Union and many other bodies, including the Medway Trades Council. And we have Steve Wilkins, who is the Secretary of the Medway Trades Council. And I will be dropping in and out as the rep for Railway because Mick's had to shoot off. So I'm now going to hand over to Chaz, really. I'll be still operating the buttons, but I understand he may have some more questions that have been raised for general discussion here from Facebook and elsewhere. Chaz, did you have anything for us?
Yeah, well, I think the general one is that I think what all of the speakers have recognised is that the law, there are so many, Camille mentioned, there are so many loopholes in the law that it's leaving individual teachers and individual members of staff isolated. And, you know, even when you've got the leadership of a militant trade union like the RMT prepared to back its members, you know, 100%, and you've got the 5 tests that the NEU are standing by, you know, it's still going to leave individual members of staff very exposed, really. So I suppose the general question to the panel is, what do we think that we can do as local activists and trade unionists to support and help build solidarity in our workplaces during the COVID-19 crisis?
Okay, anybody want to pick that up first of all? Steve?
Yeah, okay. Yes, I mean, I think it is obviously people are going to be very, very upset and worried about going back to work, particularly as it's very clear that you're not actually getting the kind of protection that is sometimes claimed that's going to happen. I mean, we know with the bin workers in Medway that who've been working throughout hadn't had that protection even during the extent of the lockdown. And of course, the answer at the end of the day is about collective action. I think one of the things about Section 44, although in theory you have a right as an individual to say, I'm not going there, I'm not going to work there. Of course, as we know, employers aren't always going to sort of say, yes, okay, that's fine, whatever the law says, and you have to fight the law much, much later. So it's always collective. And I think one of the most important things is for this crisis, and as we go forward, as Mick was saying about what's coming down the track, is a huge recession or depression, in fact. And we know what the response of employers will be. It will be redundancies, it will be wage cuts, it will be cuts to conditions. And the answer, and we have to support each other. I think one of the key things is that trade union, this is the point about the trade union movement, that is solidarity. I mean, I think there is, if the government goes ahead with the 1st of June, there are already, I know, talks about doing protests on that day, organising protests on that day, and I think that's something that should happen, and we will doubtless be discussing that at our meeting on Wednesday. And it's quite, and I think one of the other important things is that what we have seen during this pandemic is that there has been a revival in the fear has the anger has overcome the fear, or the fear of catching the COVID has been stronger than the fear of sanctions from the employer, and people have walked out. They've walked out, and they have won. Generally speaking, they have got they've got the PPE that they needed, and they've got as safe as they can. And I think that it's important that everybody, we can try and do things like, even in your workplace, even if it's taking a group selfie and saying, school shouldn't open until it's safe. Things like that, it all helps to build people's confidence and to make people feel that they're not alone and can actually do something.
Oh, thanks very much for that. Anybody else? Camille, did you want to?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the thing about solidarity, we have to remember we're all trade unionists, and one thing that we have learned within the National Education Union is that, this COVID, it affects everybody. It affects everybody's lives. It affects our parents, it affects our children, and it affects our staff members. And all I keep on saying is we're only as strong as our weakest link, yeah? And right now, how we're being affected by it, we have to provide solidarity. So where we have these schools where heads are saying they don't need PPE, but the government is saying you should at least have this, collectively as trade unionists, we need to be calling them out on this, because, what are we saying for our members? We're saying you should go in there knowing the risk that you're going in there to. You should just go in there. I don't want to see a wall full of educators who have lost their lives to COVID. I'm sad for those that have died already, but I don't want to add to that. And so that's the reason why I think, we have so many members who are attending our meetings, who want to hear what the union's going to do to support them, because they are very afraid. And I think one of the things about us as trade unionists is that, we can't fear. We just have to keep on going forward. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks very much, Camille. Riz, did you want to come in?
Yes, very much so. I agree with Camille. Even just today, we had a question from a teacher who has been asked to go to sort of do administrative tasks from the 1st of June, as well as go to people's houses delivering stuff. Now, since when have we become delivery boys? This is what's bothering me. And remember, in this area where I live in Medway, there were many teachers who come from Faversham. Now, if you ask, I live in Medway, that's fine. I can deliver the stuff. I won't, but I'm just saying. But somebody who living in Faversham, you're asking them to come all the way to Kent, then deliver this. What about their own safety? And they're going to these houses. Safety is one thing, health is wealth, and the fear of going into school, doing a job which they have not been paid for. They're paid to teach, they're paid to do the work, but they're not paid to put up posters. That is what the union says. And unless we get that across to our teachers, show solidarity, same as Steve was saying, a selfie would be wonderful to say we are all in the same boat together. On the other hand, every parent that I've spoken to over the last 2 weeks have rung me up. I haven't rung them. They have rung me up and they have said, what they were afraid of is gone now. Will we be fined? These are not rich people. Will we be fined? But I don't want to send my daughter or son to school why, if, and they have picked up, Eton is not sending their children till the 1st of September. Why should ours be cannon fodder to try out whether COVID is okay on these children? And so the rest of the community can be all right, the upper echelons?
Great, thanks, Riz. Yeah, I can only add to that in that this is just a crazy situation, and you could, if you look at it from any angle, it can only be driven by finance and by the need to get business back in moving again and to make money. There can be no other reason for this, because you just would not in any sane way take a risk with your children's lives. I've got 13 grandchildren, and the thought of any of them going back to school at the moment is just awful, absolutely awful. The whole basis around this road crash back to work is just flawed from top to bottom. Yes, they say you should put mitigating factors in, but there's nothing to force employers to put those mitigating factors back in to support us and to help us. And we have an even more convoluted issue at the moment with one of our train operating companies and an organisation of contract cleaners, where one of the cleaners works at a terminal station. Well, it's a through station, but it has a terminal platform as well. Excuse me. And they have a cleaner there to clean through the train when it comes in before it goes back out on a return journey. He has about 8 minutes to go through the train, clean the toilet, pick the litter. So it's a rubbish timing anyway. He's now got to, when the train comes in, he's got to get on, try and do the cleaning before the passengers after the passengers got off, before the other passengers get on, so that he can keep his 2 metres distance. Yes. So being a sensible lad, he worked out with the platform staff a system where the platform staff would keep the other passengers from getting on the train, so he could dive on, rush through, get off the other end, the passengers get on with a clean train that's been decluttered, so there's less chance of infection for them. And the local manager found out about it and put a stop to it. He said, well, that's not what we want you to do. He said, but it's a perfectly safe system to work in. It just makes sense. And they said, no, we don't want you to do it. So now he's not doing his job fully, because he has to jump on the train before any passengers get on, do what he can. As soon as they start crowding in, he has to jump off the train.
Get off. Yes.
You know, it's just ludicrous. And the whole system is like that. There is no logic to it whatsoever.
They don't want any logic.
Yeah. And I know we've been talking about the use of Section 44, but you've got to be a very strong and confident person to actually turn around to a manager and say, well, I'm invoking Section 44 until you sort this out. I'm not going to work, especially if you're a low-paid cleaner. Who's already in a vulnerable job to start with.
Yeah.
So
and it's exactly the same in education. Exactly the same. Education staff, whatever rank they are afraid to go and say, I am frightened to work within this context because I know it's not safe. They're afraid, and they're afraid because, you know, they could get the sack, or they could be pushed out of their job differently with no recompense for anything. So I mean, and what do you do? So that's where the unions come in, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's where they've got to come and represent. Yeah.
But I would advise. Sorry, I was going to say I would always advise with Section 44 that you do it collectively. Yeah. I mean, you know, that's the thing is that once if everybody or most people are doing it, then it's much more difficult for managers to take sanctions, and you win. To be honest, you usually win, you know. But everyone's got to do it, you know, or most people have got to do it, and that's absolutely key. And when you actually look what's actually happening, you know, it's, you know, the schools is absolutely crazy because people have gone back to work. They've gone back to work a couple of weeks. I reckon that if it's open schools on the 1st of June, that's just coming into the point at which anybody who's got infected since going back to work is suddenly going to start showing the signs, and you could have the schools back, and then suddenly a massive spike in infections.
Yeah.
which is going to endanger. It's not just whether the children will infect teachers or spread it to other children to take their families. The children are in families where people have had to go back to work, often in unsafe conditions, and they could give it to their children.
Absolutely.
You can see how the whole thing spreads very, very quickly.
Absolutely.
It's about 5 days, I understand, before you get symptoms from infection. So again, 5 days worth of being asymptomatic, but in fact infectious.
And the thing is, people are going back to work because they're afraid, because they keep on seeing all these companies saying they're making these people redundant, they're making this set of people redundant. People are fearful for their jobs, so they are going back to work, even though they may not feel safe. They're going back to work because they want to have a job, right? So when you're in a situation where life is so precarious, you've got to go back. We don't actually know, as you said, we don't know what the effect of all of that is going to be. We don't know. And because we've got no testing, because they're not testing properly and there's no access to testing, I said from the start, I said, if they want to open the schools and they have mobile testing units that are going to go around every single school every week and test, that's fine. But if they're just going to throw us to the wolves and just say, well, testing's not ready yet, but you can go in because you'll be fine. You're talking nonsense. They've sent people back to work. Testing's still not available. So really, we will know by June. I would like to think it's going to keep on going down, but what's the odds on that?
Very good point. Yeah, but I mean, don't forget, even when you act collectively, there are no guarantees. We've only got to look at our comrades at Norse at the moment. I was telling you earlier, Camille, about the Norse situation, where I think it's now 19 of them are facing disciplinary action just for protesting about trying to stay safe at work, and the fact that the Tory-led Medway Council are not playing their role as a secondary employer and forcing Norse to actually provide proper safe working conditions and equipment for their members. So I'm going to ask Chaz to come back in and see if there's anything else that anybody's asked to bring up. Chaz, you still there?
Yeah. So we've had a question from Ralph, and Ralph has said, what is planned for the 28th of May and the 1st of June? I think what he might be referring to is there anything planned in terms of national action or national protest action? I'm not aware of anything. Does that mean that we think that there should be? And in the absence of anything happening nationally, is there anything that we think we could do locally? I hope I've got the gist of what Ralph was wanting to ask there.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, mate. Yeah, Steve. Actually, no, let's ask Rizwana. What do you want to come in on that first?
I do think that we need to, if 1st of June, if you're talking about the 28th and the 1st of June, I do feel that we need to ramp up the pressure somehow, because I know the teachers, doesn't take very much for the head teacher to put, I'm just thinking of teachers at the moment, put teachers in capability procedure. They don't have to do anything. Somebody can come and sit in their room and observe them and then go back and say, yeah, but we are helping you, and that is, so we do need, the more meetings like this we have, the more events, in a sad way, because we shouldn't be having that type of events, but it will raise the confidence of the teachers, who I'm sure will be facing this type of pressure, and it is pressure, and then they back down and say, oh yes, well, yes, and forget about it. But the person who has been put into, even thought about being put into capability procedures, it affects their whole life, their family life, and their stress levels, their health. And if health is wealth, which is all we have at the moment, or always have had, we really do need, I think, to do something to carry on the momentum. If we just leave the momentum, then it looks like we're fizzling out. We are backing down. I know we are all afraid for our jobs, and it is even, and some people say, what shall we do? But the thing is, you have to, if you don't have life, what's the point of having a job?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. I mean,
Steve?
as far as I know, there are in various parts of the country people are planning to do something on the 1st of June. I think one of the things that we've done very recently, which I think could be quite effective, would be convoys of cars. You know, because you're automatically socially distanced. That's one of the more simple things. I mean, we can't visit every school, but I mean, we could go through the centre of the towns, with cars with placards and notices saying no going back till it's safe, and push through. I mean, as I said, people who are at work can do, can do little protests, either sort of outside, socially distanced with placards and things on social media, or even individually, or what. But the more that there is, I mean, I also have heard that there is a call for BAME parents not to send their kids to school because they are going to be more vulnerable. How that works out, I don't know. But I think the thing is, all these protests the more protests there are, the easier it will be to enforce the measures that are necessary, and it will put pressure on the government. The thing is that they will be, if there is a spike again, they will be even more. They'll hesitate less about clamping down and stopping the schools again if necessary. That's all that I think is quite important. Any messages of support, anything, posters in windows, all these things are, to build some kind of movement, some kind of idea that actually most people think this is stupid and we're opposed to it, and we hold the government to account. Yeah.
I think people are just very, very stressed because all the information came out today. People are seeing lots and lots of checklists on the last day of term, and the government did that deliberately. So people are now having to think about whether they should be working through half term and in order to respond, or what they should do. So I'm trying to think in the midst of all of that nonsense, whether they would be up for doing something. I don't know. But yeah.
Well, I mean, it's not going to be so much the teachers because they're probably going to be back, yeah. But it's everybody else as well.
Yes, I agree. I like the idea of the convoy.
Yeah. I mean, my daughter is a year 1 teacher, and from what I gather about what they're actually going to do, it's going to be a pretty dreadful experience for the children.
Yes.
I mean, this is despite all these crocodile tears about oh dear, all these poor children who are vulnerable, who are deprived, and why are they deprived? And they're missing out on their education. Actually, from what I gather, they are not going to, no one's going to deliver the national curriculum. They're going to do project work. They're not going to. They're not allowed to. The teachers can't mark books. No. Because all the books might spread contamination. So they're not going to do marking. So what sort of education are they
doing? Exactly. It's just bodies in a classroom. It's just ridiculous. It is ridiculous.
Yeah. I think actually there is an element of fatigue here as well. I think people are so tired of COVID and their feeling of helplessness almost. They're almost saying, well, what's the point? What can we do? And I think it's times like this actually when trade unions, the TUC, the local trade union councils need to take leadership and show leadership and show that there is a way to fight back.
Yes,
there is a way to resist and to show support wherever we can. I mean, without blowing our own trumpet, locally we've been supporting the guys from Norse. We did the drive-by protest at Medway Council and outside the Norse depot. We're organising things like this online, but there's a lot more that can be done. But we're a small group of activists. A lot of people belong to the Trades Council, but as with all organisations, there's a much smaller group who actually engage and put stuff on.
Yes.
So it is difficult and it is tiring and sometimes it's really disheartening. but I think it's important that we all
It
keep
is
going,
important.
and we have to keep going, because otherwise, well, it doesn't bear thinking about, because they're just going to run rampant, and we know there are going to be massive attacks when we do finally get back to some semblance of normality, and everybody's going to be greatly weakened to resist those attacks, and so we need to find some way of ramping it up, to use one of Johnson's favourite terms, and actually getting people angry and educate and agitate.
Yes.
And where possible, organise as well.
I think
agree.
one of the important. I don't think it's quite as bleak as that. I mean, I think one of the things about COVID, and people actually have been taking action, and the lesson is that actually they did it and it worked. In most cases, not everywhere, but in most cases it worked. And I think that's quite important, because that's what we've been missing for the last 30 odd years, is this idea that if you act together, you can win. It's not something that's sort of impossible or unlikely, or you're doomed to fail, so what's the point? You know, I think, you know, this idea will be, and the more people that do it and win, the more the idea catches on, and there are years and years of repressed anger, really, you know, in workplaces, and you know, who knows the possibilities in the future.
Okay, I'm going to take one more question from Chaz then, if he's got any more. Let's see if he hasn't run off and made the tea.
One more question.
Chaz, are you with us? Here he is.
I haven't actually got any more Facebook questions, but I'll put one myself, really, to all of you. I mean, to what extent do you think the issue of austerity and actually poverty underpins this whole crisis? I was very struck today looking at the news from France, and how in France, although there's been a return to the classroom, it's the children of the middle class families who've actually gone back, and the working class families, the poor, have stayed away. And you know, we've talked around the issues of the vulnerability of the BAME community here, but I've been following some of the discussions in the United States about how the high incidence of COVID-19 in the poorest districts, and to what extent do you think that we as trade unionists and as socialists should take up the issue of COVID-19, not just as an issue of a pandemic that is the response of which has been botched by the government, but as something that really is disproportionately affecting poor and working class people, and that we need to actually fight for a different society in which equality and our rights as working people should be respected.
Okay, thanks for that, Chaz. That's just quite a wide-ranging question. As you ask a question, perhaps you just stay on as you are. Don't knock yourself out, because you enjoy the conversation as well. Chaz, we want you back. Come back. Don't leave us. Okay, well, I'm going to ask Camille what she thinks about that first of all.
I think that the issue of poverty and the poverty of the working classes has been something that I think this government already realizes, because when COVID began, notice how they found the money to get the homeless off the streets. They found the money to make sure that everybody had enough money to live. They did all of those things because it stopped the virus from going round, right? So for the first time in my memory, they actually made a point of ensuring that everybody, even the poorest, had some money, right? Now, I'm not saying there hasn't been gaps in that. I'm not saying people haven't fallen through the net. I'm not saying people didn't have money. But again, there have been so many food banks. There have been people coming around and knocking on doors and saying, if you need a parcel, you can get one. So my position has been, they know that austerity has caused people to be in this point of deprivation where they have no food, they can't think where the next pennies come from, they have to use food banks, and they're having to supply the money to make that happen. So it's not that they didn't have the money, they've always had the money, right? But they've just decided when it suits them to let go of that money. And now you see they're coming back from that now and saying that they're going to reduce this monies that they're giving in terms of the furlough scheme and stuff like that. They're taking that back slowly but surely so that the redundancies happen. And then we're going to have an even bigger number of people who are poorer, living in deprived areas because of this retraction of the monies that exist. So yes, as trade unionists, I think as trade unionists, we need to articulate that message better. I think we need to do it in a way that people can see it better, in the same way that the Tories have their catchphrases that caught the hearts and minds of lots of people. We've got to have something that is going to catch the minds of the poorest and the most disadvantaged groups in our society. And I don't know whether it's a catchphrase, I don't know what it is, but we've got to find some way for them to understand what is happening and what a better life could be like. Yeah, and I feel that quite strongly.
Riz?
Yes, I agree with Camille. There has been a revolution since March the 23rd in the social media and the take-up of the community. They are more aware of it, and we need to capitalize on it, because people who didn't even know the word what Zoom was, they are all on it, they're all looking into it. If there are obviously other platforms as well. So we as trade unionists, we need to plug into that so that we can keep drip feeding or maybe even flooding the market. If you give them 10 stories in a day and if you hammer it, one day it will sink in. Because people, my daughter, who for years and years, become member of union, Steve knows that, always going on about it. Oh yes, Mom, I will. She finally filled in the form 3 days ago. And that if she can do it, and she's not that she's not lazy, she's just, most of her friends are not members of the union.
Yes, true.
I was 19 or 20, we were members of the union. We were on the streets. We were the generation that was asking for our rights. The young now don't ask for their rights. They just think they will be given to them. They have suddenly realized and become aware because of COVID. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise in a way, because it has woken up the young. And we need to capitalize on that. We need to get them back on our side, because they are our future. When I was in the union movement, we were all my age. There were hundreds of them. When I go there now, there are so few. I see 1 or 2 at the Labour Party group, and you will agree with me. And it's like gold dust. Where are they coming from? And we need, and also part of the problem is the long hours. I mean, the teaching is, the work-life balance is ridiculous.
Yeah.
You can't go to a meeting at 7:30. It's all the old people, because you just cannot. After you finished work, you've done the marking, and the worst of it is you have to, I can honestly say to you, if I was teaching now, I would not be able to sustain it. 2 days a week is about all I would sustain, because you not only have to do your marking, put it in your mark book, which I've done all my life. You have to then put it on the computer. You also have to check the emails. And this is not anecdotal, it happened to me. I went to school one morning, and the SLT or senior leader team, whatever you call it, they all keep changing their titles all the time. stood up and said, I sent an email about such and such thing which was going to happen. And this young mother standing opposite me said, well, I haven't seen that email. And I had read it because it was sent out at 11:25 at night. But because I didn't have small children at that moment in time, I could get into work at 7:30. She can't get into work at 7:30. And the SLT had the audacity to say, I sent it out at 11:25 at night. And we need, I don't know how we are going to do it, but it's after COVID is what I want the battle to carry on. We need the battle to carry on. Otherwise, all the sacrifices made, it has been made by the deprived people in the communities. They have made the sacrifices. In the Midlands, because of this intergenerational housing, the whole families, 5 brothers, that was within the first 2 weeks of after 23rd of March, 5 brothers and their dad all died.
Wow.
Exactly. So the battle must start now when we are coming out of lockdown rather than sort of reduce it. We should ramp up the pressure. I know there are a few of us, but with the digital media, which the children are still listening to, the young are still listening to, we should latch on to it. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Riz. Steve, right, you're itching to
Yeah.
get in.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are in a situation where we are have 3 simultaneous global crises. We have coronavirus, we have the economic crisis, and we have climate change. All of those hit the poor the hardest. No question about it. It is the poor who will be hit the hardest. I mean, it's interesting that the government are now sort of trying to pretend austerity. Oh yes, well that was yesterday, and it's at an end. But of course, we know perfectly well they may not call it austerity, but the same sorts of things are going to happen, but much more so. I mean, I saw something recently that was suggesting that we were looking at something like 25% youth unemployment. You know, that's going to be appalling. You know, it's and there is going to have to be fight back. And I mean, some people will be forced to fight back because it will be a question of personal survival.
Yes.
I think to a certain extent, you know, the COVID thing has been about personal survival in some cases. So, but the point is, of course, is that we need organisation. We have to have organisation to do those things, and we have to be able to fight back and to organise and to explain what's going on and why, and explain the history, because of course that's something that is most people know very little about our history. You know, all the awkward stuff is pushed to the side. You don't teach about it. I mean, I think one of the things coming back about young people and trade unions, the thing is, when we started work, joining the union was an obvious thing. Because on your first day, they said, are you going to join the union? And you said, yes, of course. Yeah. And the thing was that people were brought in and they knew it. And you could see, you know, because, I mean, in the early 70s when I started work, you know, there were strikes and they were winning. And you could see, yes, obviously. And of course, that's something that has disappeared over the years. You know, people, you know, the older people in the workplace are also people who weren't in the union when they joined, weren't asked to join the union when they joined, you know, in the 1980s and 90s and the rest of it. And so, you know, so the newest generation obviously know nothing about trade unions in many cases. And it's very important to explain that it's not about somebody doing it for you. So, you know, what's the general secretary doing? What's the branch secretary doing? It's about it's about collective in the workplace, us all together. We're the ones. We have the power, because quite frankly, without workers, there is nothing.
Absolutely.
As COVID has very clearly demonstrated, it is the unskilled, as they like to call them, the unskilled, the people with the low
thing going,
who are the people who we absolutely rely on when it comes to the absolute basics of life. And I think that's something that hopefully will continue, and something that we certainly will keep mentioning.
Absolutely.
Okay, so for my response, Chaz, I mean, yes, poverty absolutely does have a correlation to the issues around COVID and pretty much everything that we do as trade unions and socialists and what have you. The key driving factor around everything is that there is a system that deliberately keeps a large section of the community in poverty, because that's how you keep wages down.
Yeah.
That's how you force people to do as they're told and comply and don't rock the boat. With all due respect to Steve, you're right. We had closed shops when I joined the railway back in 1979, but they're not coming back anytime soon. I wish they would. Trust me, I do, but they're not. So we need to, honour the past, but we really need to find ways of reacting to the future and actually changing the future narrative ourselves. And the only way we could do that is people with slightly darker hair than mine. Actually joining the movement and taking up the cudgel to the point where they just call us old farts who don't know anything as we sit and dribble in the corner. But yeah, so the answer to the question, obviously, to poverty is yes, that is a key factor in everything that we're doing. And as usual, as we come out of it, the poorer end of society will end up paying the highest price, not just in lives, but in jobs, in income, in services and everything else. And we have to find a way to organise around that, to actually change that narrative and to bring people together. To force these politicians to change the world in which we live, because they're not going to. As we all know, they're not going to give it up willingly.
No.
Chaz, I just wanted to give you the opportunity for a last few words before we close, as it was your question. Did you want to make any further comment on that?
No, well, thank you for all of your answers. Really, I mean, I do think that personally, this is the greatest crisis in my life, and I think, as Steve said, we've got three significant things happening. We've got COVID, we've got climate catastrophe.
Yes.
We've got economic meltdown. All right. Now, last time we were in a crisis of this nature was before I was born. It was the 1930s really, and it was without wanting to be too dramatic. The world was facing a choice between fascism and socialist revolution at that time, and it ended in a conflagration of war. And I think that if I were a young person now, growing up in the last 10 years of austerity, facing a climate catastrophe, and the uncertainty that this COVID crisis has created, I'd be asking some fundamental questions about what type of society we were living in.
Absolutely.
And I think that this is our responsibility. We've struggled as trade unionists and socialists to hold the line against during the neoliberal era. But maybe we are being too conservative, really.
Yes.
So talking about Section 44 and protecting workers' rights. What can we do within the law? I think that the generation moving into the struggle now, who are facing the prospect of a severe impediment to their health, questions of life and death in the classroom or on the railway or while you're collecting the bins, they're not going to want to hang around and worry about the niceties of what happens in a court.
Absolutely.
Action, and they want action now.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's we need to be inspired by that, really, and have the courage to actually call that out and to support whatever action is taken. So anyway, I'd like to thank everybody for your answers, and I think it's been a great meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Chaz. I'm afraid the old enemy of time has beaten us again. and it's time to wind down what I think is this excellent session. I hope you've not just enjoyed it, but found it useful and informative. Thanks to our two key speakers this evening, Mick Cash and Camille London Mayo. Also to our panel of Steve Wilkins, Rizwana Shelley, and not forgetting, of course, the man with the questions, Brother Chaz Berry, for an excellent job on the live stream. Most of all, thank you all for tuning in and making the evening a success that it has been. Just have a good rest of the evening. Stay safe, stay well, and keep fighting for a better world for all of us. And as the logo says on the advert, join a union, apply Section 44, stay alive. Thank you all very much. Good night.